All right, Morgan, good to hear about your experience. Now let's jump into the case. All right, so your client is an incredibly wealthy man. Money's not a real issue with him. So because he wants a greater return than negative 1%, which he's making right now, he's interested in a return on a safe investment. So he's interested in purchasing some companies. He's been working with some business brokers and found that 50 individual residential heating and air conditioning companies, or HVAC, in the greater Atlanta area are for sale. So because I know you're going to ask for it, here's the growth rates of the market. So these businesses are each owned independently and none are part of a franchise. The greater Atlanta area is comprised of roughly 250 residential HVAC companies. And as you can see, the market is roughly 500 million. The market is highly competitive, so the total market is divided roughly between all 250 competitors. So the basic question here is, should he do it? Should he make this investment?
Okay, 1 second here. Let me just finish getting some notes. Okay. So let me just clarify a few things, just make sure we're on the same page, and then we can go forward here. So basically, the client is a really rich guy who has lots of money, and he basically wants a safe return. Mm-hmm. So he wants a positive but a safe return.
Yes.
He's come across these 50 HVAC companies that are all independently owned, and he's thrown around the idea of buying them, purchasing them all, and running that with the express purpose of getting a safe and a positive return.
Yes.
There are 250 total companies in the area with a total market size of 500 million, so each has about 2 million in total revenue. Yep. As you said, they're divided equally. The question that we're going to try to answer is, should he do it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So let me take just a minute and I'll structure this up, and then we can jump right in.
Sounds great.
Okay, so basically what I've laid out is sort of the process that I want to go through to answer this, and then we can dive into each one of these more fully. The first thing I want to do is just get a high level look at sort of his finances, like see if there is going to be some constraints, any constraints in terms of like money or anything like that. Just kind of get a feel for who he is, maybe what else he has in his portfolio, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Then I want to go ahead and find out the profitability of the company, see how much money we're going to make on each one, and then figure out how much it's going to cost us to buy them, because this is not going to be a cheap endeavor. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I want to see how we might be able to alter that profitability to boost the profits, make even more money.
Okay.
Then finally, I want to look at some risks prior to the recommendation.
Okay.
So that's kind of weird. Does that sound like a good?
I think it does. Yep. So where do you want to start?
Okay, first, just on this on our client here, there's kind of two areas I want to look at. First is his sort of financial situation.
Sure.
And then second is what he currently does, what he has in his portfolio, his operating situation.
Okay.
So in terms of finances, do we have any extra information in terms of how much money he has, or I know you said he was getting a negative return, but do we know what return he's getting?
Yeah, so currently what he's looking at is, it looks like a negative 1% return. And so, I mean, you don't really have to consider how much money he has. Assume that he has enough for this. Pretty rich guy.
Just tons of money.
Yeah.
Okay. And do we have any information on what other businesses he might have? I'm thinking that, maybe there's some synergies, or maybe he likes this type of business or something, so that could add a bonus. Do you know anything about his other businesses that he has?
No, he has no emotional connection to HVAC, and there's not really any synergy opportunity here.
Okay, so it's just kind of a random business.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now I want to go ahead and dive into the profitability of each of these companies. I want to figure out how much money each of them makes, get a feel for how they operate, and so that I can know that there. So I know that we have the revenues of about $2 million on each of these businesses from the original data. Do we have any idea about the cost structure of these companies?
Sure. So what specifically would you want to know?
Yeah, I mean, just basically the cost structure, like the breakdown of overhead, the cost of goods sold, how much they pay like employees, and I mean, what I'm really trying to get at right now is just the profitability.
Okay.
So I want to know basically, how much each one of these things makes in a year.
Okay, great. So let's say this. The cost structure is basically in this particular way that they're making about a 5% profit each unit. About 40% of the costs so out of the whole value chain here, 5% of its profit, 40% are cost of goods sold, 35% is the cost of technicians, actually the people who go out and install these heating machines and fix them, and then 15% is just overhead. So that should all add up to 100%. And then the last 5% is the profit.
Okay, sorry. So I've got cost of goods sold is 40%. Technician is 35%. Overhead is 15%. And profitability is 5%. Net profit is 5%.
Let's see this here. Okay, so yeah. So why don't we say that the overhead here? It looks like that should add up to 95%. Is that what you're getting? So let's say that the overhead is actually 20%.
Okay. That makes a bit more sense for us here. And that leaves the profit to be 5%.
Yes.
Okay. So if he was able to get this for the cost of revenue, it's a fair return, right?
Sure.
So he's getting this for about 5% here. So that's an interesting number to have, because it's about a 6% difference than what he's getting right now in terms of a return. Yeah, I mean, that's about all I needed to know just on that out. So that was pretty quick. The next thing I want to know is the price, what we're going to have to pay for this business. Now, there's two ways we can think about it. We can either, if we already know what they're asking, we can go for there, or I can come up with maybe something, a bid price, what we might feel comfortable. I mean, the easiest would be if we haven't asked. Do we have any information on what they're asking?
Yeah, so we actually do. So each business is asking roughly about 1.2 times the revenue for their sales.
Okay, 1 second here. Let me figure out how much this whole thing will cost us, and then I'll get back here. Okay, so it's gonna cost us, based on these ask prices, about $120 million, and that the 1.2 revenue, for this business, it feels probably about right. I mean, based on this, it's not a growth business. They're not, we shouldn't be paying huge multiples on this. So that feels probably about right. We can look at it and maybe come back and see if there's other ways we can change that, but for right now, let's just go on the assumption that we'll buy it at 1.2.
Okay,
does that sound good? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is basically just figure out what our profitability will be.
Sure.
Because we're not going to make 5%, because obviously we have to pay a premium for the businesses, so I want to figure out kind of what we're going to get on as a return on an ongoing basis. So basically what I'm going to do is just figure out our return, like our net profit for all these 50 businesses combined, and divide that by 120 million. And that should give me a rough estimate of what I can expect as an ongoing profit. So we said we have 50 businesses that each have about 2 million, so we have 100 million in sales off of these. Then, okay, right, so we have 5% profit, that's what I was looking for. So we have about 5 million a year in profits, and then we take 5 million, divide that by 120, we get...
What is that ballpark?
That's just over 4. 4 and change percent.
Yep.
So, I mean, we could probably estimate it at just about 4.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So you get a 4% return, which, well, it's hard to compare right now without knowing the other one. So we have a negative 1% return on this one. Is that including, like, inflation? Is that like a real rate of return?
Yeah, let's just assume that.
Okay. Inflation the last couple of years has been pretty stagnant, 1-2%. So we say 2%. So now a real return is about 2%. Net of inflation, but even that's a 3% jump.
Yeah.
On $120 million, that's a sizable amount of money.
Yeah.
You know, to make that jump.
Yeah.
A few million bucks. So that's valuable. I think, however, what I'd like to look at now, so sort of knowing that that's a pretty good idea, you know, a better idea than what he's doing. Now I want to kind of take a look at and see how we might be able to boost the profitability of this purchase, see how we can make it a better deal.
I think that's a good route to go.
Let me jot down some notes on this and then I'll jump back.
Sure.
There's kind of 2 general buckets that I can think about. The first way that we can maybe boost profitability is in synergies.
Okay.
I think the easiest thing under this is we're buying 50 just random businesses. My guess is that if we combine these 50, that we can probably squeeze more profit points, you know, up. We can get higher than 5% profit.
Okay, so basically they're more valuable together than separate.
Yep, sort of economies of scale and all
Sure.
that. And then the next bucket is how we look at the financing.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that the easiest way, though, is to go ahead and look at this cost structure and see if there's ways that we can do this.
Sounds like a great approach.
So that's where I'll jump in first.
Cool.
Now, you sort of laid out the cost here. The biggest portion is cost of goods sold. And so I'm going to sort of attack that first. It's my guess, and I don't know the industry too well, but it's my guess that if we go from being 1 out of 250 to now being 20% of the total Atlanta market, then we might actually have some bargaining power.
Sure. What would that also depend upon?
Our bargaining power?
Yeah.
So our bargaining power in terms of like this, we're bargaining with our suppliers.
Yeah.
So if for some reason, I mean, if there was like one supplier, that might make it pretty difficult to bargain, that he tends to get lost. Or if, yeah, I mean, that's probably about it.
Okay.
Just like the concentration of suppliers and how much power they have in there. Do we have any data on that?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, your gut feel was right. There are basically just 2 suppliers here, so even though we're getting bigger, we're still minnows compared to them, so we're really not getting much bargaining power.
Okay. So if I'm reading into that correctly, that means that we're not going to be able to squeeze anything out of cost of goods sold.
Yeah, cost of goods sold pretty much going to stay the same.
Okay. I'm just going to tick down through these next 2 and sort of see if there's any synergies that I can think of off the top of my head from combining these businesses.
Okay.
Let me just make some notes and Okay, so, I mean, honestly, like, once I kind of am diving into it, it's not feeling like this is going to pay off, but I'm going to explore this just in case this is a better option than what it looks like. So here's what I'm thinking about these technicians. We pay them a significant more portion of our revenue.
Uh-huh.
Now, at first I think, okay, this is good because maybe we can have less technicians because, you know, these were competing companies before, and so they have some overlap in possibly like their range that they do, like where they travel and that.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you know, our technicians currently are likely servicing about as many customers as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't really cut out technicians because we would cut off our ability to service customers.
Yeah.
So we might be able to maybe save some money on gas and just have like better routes, but I
Mhm.
think that's going to be pretty negligible.
Yeah.
Is that probably the case?
Yep, your gut feels right. I mean, we're still gonna have to service them in the same way, so there's really not gonna be a cost savings there either.
Okay. And then the next thing is about overhead. Now, I'm guessing what's included in this overhead is like our sort of support staff, like our secretaries and whatever,
Yeah.
and like our building
Mhm.
and sort of heating it and renting it and everything like that. Is that right?
Yes.
Did I miss anything in there?
No, that's the majority of it.
Okay. And this again, you know, the support staff, maybe we can sort of combine it and have some technological solution to like do the routing for us all and have maybe a smaller support staff, but that might be offset by hiring like regional managers
Mhm.
and people to sort of manage a few layers. Now that we have 50 of these, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is again, we still kind of need these to be spread out.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any information on where these are located already?
They are, so I don't have any specific data, but they are very spread out across the Atlanta area. I mean, if we were looking at a map, it's like you shot a shotgun at it, so.
So yeah, we probably need to keep them spread out
Yeah.
because of the location. It's easier for the technicians who are already working and that network is already in place.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling like probably there's not actually going to be that many synergies, like cost synergies that are going to be had in doing that.
Yep, I think you're right. So I mean, you bring up a good point that, you know, there could be some coordination and some shared costs and overhead, but it's going to be offset by, you know, kind of running this beast and hiring new management. So let's say also that there isn't really any cost savings in overhead as well.
Okay. Okay, so now the last thing that I can think of in order to change the profitability function in this is to change how we finance the deal.
Okay.
So currently what I assumed up front was that we're just going to take 120 million, because he has a lot of cash,
Mhm.
take 120 million and buy this business, but we could go into like, and do kind of a private equity model
Mm-hmm.
and have him take on a lot of debt.
Sure.
Sort of do almost a leveraged buyout
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that. Does that sound like a viable option?
Why don't we check it out? I think it does sound viable initially, and let's check it out.
Okay, so I know that the typical, when you go into a PE deal, the typical is going to put in anywhere from like 10 to 15% of their own capital,
Mm-hmm.
and then load up as much debt as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a safe assumption that I can use in this as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say for number's sake that he puts in 10% of the capital,
Okay.
and then borrows the other 100 and change
Okay.
million in order to finance this deal.
Sure.
So let me do some calculations to see how that changes the profitability,
Okay.
and then we'll talk some more.
Sounds great.
Okay, so it looks like we're gonna have about $108 million in debt
Okay.
in order to do this deal, and there's an assumption that we have to make about how we're gonna pay this back. And I mean, we could just kind of take the mortgage approach to it,
Mm-hmm.
and say we'll do it on 30 years. Does that sound like a fair guess?
Sure.
Okay. And I mean, credit right now for somebody who's credit worthy is pretty cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that's going to be like a huge factor in this. Is that going to probably be another safe assumption?
Yeah. I'm just looking at currently, debt is very cheap.
Okay. So let me estimate this here. So it's going to be just over $3 million in principal a year.
Okay.
Maybe like 3.5 in principal a year, and then we'll probably have some interest tacked onto that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a ton, so let's say maybe 4 million
Okay.
for interest and principal over the life of this note. So we're gonna have to pay out an extra 4 million out of our 5 million in net profit
Mm-hmm.
that we currently have right now. And so what we have though is 1 million in profit after the debt financing, and we have 12 million in invested capital,
Okay.
which already is gonna be, I can already feel like it's gonna give us a better return than our 4%, because this comes out to be just,
Yeah, kind
again,
of
this
ballpark,
is just north of 8%.
Okay.
So yeah, so I mean that's twice the return if you just finance this deal differently.
Sure.
So on the outset that sounds like a pretty clear home run.
Yeah.
In the way to do that, I want to sort of think about some other things that could screw up our equation here.
Sure.
And then we can talk about those a bit more.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that briefly, and then I like where you're going with this. So.
Okay.
So let's talk briefly about this.
Okay. So here's sort of the risks I've been thinking about here. These are some of them are sort of out of their control. We know we're in a pretty down economy right now. There's been some recovery, but I know that part of the country was pretty particularly hit in the housing crisis and in the credit crunch, and so you know it's not a stable market right now.
Okay.
And it's my feeling that residential heating and air conditioning is based a lot on the residential housing market, right? If people aren't buying houses or living in their own house, or people are still getting foreclosed on, they're not going to be spending extra money on buying a heating and air conditioning
Doesn't make
system.
sense to have a heater if no
So
one's there.
if you know the last few years, it seems like it's been going in the right direction, but if it takes even a slight turn south because we're so levered, it could be pretty bad.
Okay.
Also, any government regulations, and you just never know what they're going to do. Like they could mess up the currency,
Sure.
which would have an effect on how much we can pay and receive for our services.
Sure.
There could be regulations on new regulations on heating and air conditioning, like health regulations or green regulations. Other risks that I have here, we talked about supplier power already, and again, if they were to increase their prices a few percent, that would essentially price us out of all of our profits.
Yeah.
Because we're so levered.
Sure.
So a low year, even just in terms of sales, just for random reasons, we have a low year, it can take out all the profits. And also this is pretty risky because it is an operating business. There's always just inherent risk in tying your capital in an operating business. It's very concentrated, you're not really diversifying here. There's just an inherent risk that goes along with this.
Okay.
So I mean, all told, given his current situation of losing money every year, losing 1% of his capital every year, it feels like this could be a good thing to do.
Sure.
It feels pretty good. Now, if it were me, I would be pretty hesitant about this, because if I'm going to be tying up my capital into an operating business, somewhere between 4 and 8%, or rather 2 and 6% real return after inflation, is not really like the type of home run investment that me personally that I would be looking for if I'm going to start a business.
Yeah.
So I mean, tentatively, if he's looking for a very safe and a reasonable return, my feeling is yes.
Okay.
This is a better investment than what he's currently doing right now.
Okay.
In order to, there's other things I would like to look at though. I would like to do some analysis on these risks that we highlighted, housing market, any new government regulations, sort of check out these risks here. And then I'd also like to do a better search in, what other businesses are available. Either other businesses in the area, different complete industries, or even go into like venture capital, sort of seed investing, or whatever else.
Okay.
Because there's a whole universe of ways that this guy could make money, and probably with less work.
Mm-hmm. And you compare those to the return.
I compare them to the return here and see, kind of do a risk reward trade-off based on those.
Okay.
And after doing those things, we'd feel more solid. But right on the outside, I feel like this is probably it's a good way to go.
Great. Well, thanks for the recommendation. You had some really rich ideas, and we'll get back to you on your candidacy.
Thanks, man.